England and Japan this weekend, folks. Steve Borthwick up against Eddie Jones. It is a tasty one for the fact that the two coaches are coming back together, this time as adversaries at Twickenham. Although neither side is, to be honest, in the greatest of places. I've just had a wee nap because I've been feeling a bit under the weather, and Borthwick for England would have probably had a bit of a stomachache of his own with some of the results not going their way thus far in this Autumn Nation Series. Japan, likewise. They played some pretty good teams. They played France, got pretty well beaten. They played the All Blacks, got pretty well beaten. And they got a win last week over Uruguay. So they at least come into this one on the back of a win. Squads have been named. We'll go through them pretty quick so I can go back and have a lie down. Some stats, predictions, and you guys can let us know your thoughts. Borthwick has decided to keep things relatively stable. He needs to get some confidence into his starters, and that makes sense with the selection. You've got Genge, George, and Stewart. No changes in the front row. Second row the same, Itoje and Martin. And those guys have been genuinely pretty good at disrupting opposition line-out ball. England and the All Blacks, I feel like, are two of the better proponents at that in recent times, at least in Tier 1 rugby, in terms of being able to disrupt opposition line-out. Tom Curry and Underhill are playing alongside each other, 6 and 7, so Curry takes the spot of Cunningham South. That's a whole lot of tackling and potential turnovers in that back row. And then Ben Earl, the workhorse who gets singled out so often on social media for either celebrating or having a sad look on his face or whatever. But he's generally a pretty good player. I would say even an exceptional player who's prone to at least one pretty kind of catastrophic dumb decision every game. But he's there at number 8. The combo of Van Portfleet and Smith is the 19 combo. And Smith, you would say, I think has been in pretty cracking form for the English All-Autumn Nation Series. So he may be the one to kind of push the team through to their first victory of this Autumn Nation Series. Slade and Lawrence, familiar midfield. It's been pretty much Borthwick's preferred combo this Autumn Nation Series. And the wings, Freeman and Slightholme, no changes there. Only change comes with Furbank replacing Freddie Stewart, who was there against the Box. And more and more of a playmaking running option. Slightly kind of agile-footed Furbank compared to Stewart, who is good at diffusing high balls, but agility is not really his strength. The bench-wise, the incoming debutant of Asha Opoku Fojo is an exciting one. I've seen some highlights of him running through people in some YouTube videos. He looks to be a pretty devastating ball-carrying prop. I look to see how he can go at scrum time as well, albeit not up against the strongest scrummaging pack in the world in Japan. Cunningham South drops to the bench. And then Finn Smith, finally, going to get a crack. There's no room for George Ford this week, who didn't even feature from the bench last week for Japan. I'm relatively familiar with the Japanese squad. I don't watch the League One, but I watch them in the Pacific Nations Cup, so I know the vast majority of their players who've been capped at international level. And they've put in, well, the front row is Okabe, Harada, and Takeuchi. So Takeuchi comes in at tight head. He didn't play last week. And then they've lost Warner Dearns to a red card last week, and it was a straight red card as well. Not a 20-minute red card. He got a red card towards the end of that game for the Brave Blossoms against Uruguay. Head-on-head tackle. So he's unavailable, and he's been one of their best players alongside Dylan Riley, but he's not available. So they've brought in Wanga from the bench to start. He's a tall bit of timber. So this Japanese squad isn't one that lacks for some tall timber. And Uleviti is the main line-out guy, at least last week anyway. So it is a decently tall second row for Japan. Shimokawa and Himeno switch jerseys. So Himeno's at 7, Shimokawa's at 6 to make way for Makisi at 8. Makisi is a direct ball carrier. And the other two guys, well, Himeno can do a bit of everything. He's played a bit of Super Rugby. Shimokawa, a bit of a tackling machine. The backs, I mentioned a change. McCurran at 10, it caught me by surprise because as far as I am aware, he is a 12 by trade. But here he is at Twickenham playing 10. I looked at his whole season for his Japanese club this year. He's not started at 10 once. So talk about going in the deep end. Saito, the captain's lost him at 9. Nakabula swaps wings. He scored a try last week. He's pretty lightning. Fijian winger. Osada comes in on the right wing, and then Matsunaga is a kind of another playmaking option, shifts to fullback. So you might expect the Japanese to kick a bit more this week for Fita and Riley there in the midfield. If you're looking for guys to watch out for, Riley is certainly one of them in the midfield. He is genuinely pretty class. They've gone with a 6-2 split. Ben Gunter is the kind of extra back, and he's another tackle machine. So I'm guessing Eddie expects a forward battle to be of utmost importance up against England's kind of 5-3 split. Some stats for you. England, they've played Japan this year, and it was interesting to see a switch of tact from them that they mauled They mauled that game a lot. They mauled 13 times, which is more than their average of like 6 or 7. So they really set to work to try and dominate the Japanese pack up front. And interestingly, for their defensive system is a little bit of a concerning trend. In the last 3 games, they've conceded a lot of clean breaks compared to the amount that they have generated. It was 5-8 against New Zealand. It was 6-13 against the Aussies. And it was 7-5 or 5-7 against the Box. So the English, all 3 of those games, didn't generate anywhere near as many clean breaks as their opponents. So defensive system still a bit of a work in progress. For the Japanese, they won a bunch of turnovers against Uruguay last week, and that game was in the balance for quite some time. Japan only kind of pulled it out of the fire in the kind of final quarter of that game, but we've noticed when they've played the big teams like New Zealand and like France, they've had troubles defensively. The tackling percentage has not been great. Lineouts last week were a little bit sketchy. Going into the game against England, you have to wonder about how that is going to go, but their main thing is they've been guilty of coughing up just too much ball. Turnovers conceded count is always really, really high. And we like the Japanese team to kind of chuck it around a lot. That's in their DNA, but sometimes there needs to be a little bit more caution just so you don't always throw the 50-50 pass. Recent history, and I believe it is the entire history between these sides, the last 5 matches are 5-0 to England. Japan's never beaten England, but the oldest of those last 5 games goes back to 1987. Some of you watching this would have not even been born. I myself was just a wee lad in 1987. Then they've played a few recent games. They played each other this year. Like I mentioned, it was pretty emphatic. 52-17 over in Tokyo. 34-12, 52-13, and 35-15. Those are the kind of more recent fixtures. Barring the 87 one, all the others are 2018 through to 2024. So it's generally been a pretty comfortable one for England. They've never really had a kind of scare from Japan, who have given other teams a scare, certainly. Average score 43-13 kind of indicates that. Bookies are predicting this one to be equally similar scoreline. The bookies are saying 33-point advantage to England. The Rugby Forecast algorithm says 25. It is on at Twickenham at 4:10 in the afternoon, which is a pretty horrendous time for anyone in Japan to be watching. It's slightly better for me in New Zealand at 5 o'clock in the morning. If I'm feeling all right, I will watch this one live. Craig Evans, the Welshman, is the referee. You guys let us know your thoughts on how this one is going to go. Do you see Borthwick basically putting the Japanese team to the sword? This is the game where England fire. They absolutely need to fire. If they don't fire, then Borthwick maybe gets fired, you'd have to say. But I don't know. I think England have been in their games, so I don't think it's all doom and gloom. Personally, sitting here down on the other side of the world, and for Japan, I think the expectations of this one are pretty low. They'll be more disappointed with their Pacific Nations Cup final they lost to Fiji than if they don't get a win at Twickenham. But obviously they'd like it to be competitive. You guys let us know your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel. I'm going to go have a sit down. Take care and bye-bye.